yours?
Biracial?
Biracial?
You don't want it so bland? What do you want?
That's so bland, yeah.
What part is that? So that's not on?
No, they're both on, actually. It's left. They're both left.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about both of us being biracial.
How you say biracial in Spanish? How you say biracial in Spanish? Because that would be dope. Because then...
Spanish.
Well, my point is we're in a Spanish community. As biracial people.
We are? It's considered...
I'd say the region is.
Oh, the region. Okay, that makes sense.
Looking regionally,
yeah.
You got Caucasian folks.
Yep.
Latino folks.
Uh-huh.
African American.
Yeah.
And then biracial.
And then everyone else?
No, there's clearly Asian. There's probably a bunch of demographics I'm missing, but I'm saying in our like connection to people.
Yeah. Well, we know like people who are black and Asian are Blasian, right? So if you're like, I guess you could say negro y blanco, but that just seems kind of lame, right? Black and white.
Yeah, I don't want to say black and white because then I'm thinking of Michael Jackson's "It Doesn't Matter." Yeah, exactly. That's so true.
Biradical? No,
that would cover you.
It would cover me.
That would cover you. It's a us thing. I think, like I'm saying, so we're biracial because we're making a platform and the connection is you grew up
birational.
But it could be more complex. We're just creating a platform.
No, I was saying birational.
There you go, birational. So that would be me. But the merge of us together is birational.
It's two different rational ways of looking at things.
Birational.
Okay.
That's where we are. That's the name of the show.
Okay.
See? And we incorporated the people.
Yep. So.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Boucher. No, I hate that. Hey, everyone. It's Mike. I'm a co-host of Birational. I'm here with Dennis, my co-host.
What's up, everybody?
This is our first episode.
Number one.
We don't know what we're doing, really. We're just kind of going with the flow.
That's it.
The whole premise of this streaming podcast, if you will, is that both Dennis and I, we share a commonality. We're both biracial, but we have two different perspectives. And we want to be able to discuss about those different perspectives and provide you with a different perspective that most people don't have. And through the uniqueness of both our different lives, I feel that there's going to be a lot that people can learn. And there's a lot of things that maybe you didn't see or perspective you didn't see or be able to gather simply because most people only live in a single racial environment or lifestyle. So I think I want to start this first episode off by really kind of talking about our backgrounds just a little bit. And Dennis, what can you tell us about your background without getting too deep in the weeds? Because we'll talk about it over time. But tell us about your life.
I just grew up rough. I grew up rough. I think anyone that grew up in poverty and grew up with kind of domestic violence background and poverty and just being in the part of the community where those things happen.
Yep.
That's what I grew up in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was hoping for a little bit more detail. I'll give you a good example. I'll use mine. So I grew up in the Boston area. I was born in Malden, grew up in Dorchester. And when I was growing up, I think a lot of people found it unusual to see, like, me having a white father, my mother, who's actually Jamaican, but most people just see her as black, right? Unfortunately, that's how people see things, just by color. And then we go from Dorchester, this area of Boston, and we go all the way to Haverhill, and that's just a completely different animal.
Like all the skills that you need in one area, you have to shed, and then you have to acquire new skills.
Yep.
For this area, and you have to figure that out in real time.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of skills, for example, one thing, I don't know, maybe it's considered trauma, but like one thing that I remember from like being 4 years old is like, I remember this one news broadcast, and it was for a murder, And I'm looking at it. I'm like, that corner looks familiar. And it was a few houses down from where I used to live. And then the following year, I'm in Haverhill. And it's a different thing. You know what was happening in my corner?
What?
There was a race fight. I don't know if you remember, or I had that happen before. But like, basically what happened was I was living on the Avs.
Break it down.
Well, I was living on the Avs.
What
Cedar
part of
Street.
the Ave?
I was in between 8th and 9th.
Okay, we got to pause.
Okay.
You got to explain the ads because
Sure.
people.
Okay, yeah. So here in Haverhill, you have Avs. So it's like from 4th to like 19th, I think, if I remember correctly. And then there's two roads going parallel. You got Main Street, and then you have Cedar Street, and then you have Primrose. I was on Cedar Street, so I was kind of like wedged in the middle, and all the Avs are kind of like, I don't want to say the rougher homes, but they're homes that are closer together. A lot of them are like multi-family homes. There's a few single family mixed in. And so there's a lot of people in one concentrated area. And so we moved into a duplex. My parents were able to save up, and they bought a duplex in Haverhill. And so I was in first grade, and I know now it's like a race fight, but it was a person of color I see with a person who was white. They were probably teenagers, and they were basically brawling it out at the the little bar on 8th Ave. Yeah, they would fight there, and it happened a few times.
8th Ave.
And I had no clue what was going on.
Right.
I was just 6 years old at the time, but now that I'm older, I'm like, oh yeah, they were fighting because they didn't appreciate each other's differences. And I don't know if you want to call this like a microaggression, but I remember like we used to have a neighbor across the street. Now she was originally from Roxbury, but she was white. And the only way we found out, my mother was chit chatting with her, but otherwise she probably would pretend that she was never from there, right?
Yeah.
And she would make these these little comments like, "Oh, I can't believe those people are here. Look what they're doing to our neighborhood." And mind you, she probably moved into Haverhill only a couple years before us, and that's a normal thing. And I don't want to go on a tangent here, but I have to. So, you might have heard the term white flight, right?
White flight?
Yes.
I have not, but you would have to break it down anyway.
Okay. So white flight is it's a particular trend that happened in certain like major cities. Okay. So Boston was one of them.
Yes, I do.
So like
migration.
Yeah, basically the white migration. So you have a bunch of white people, in particular in Boston, they were leaving because they didn't like the fact that schools were becoming integrated because the busing system got integrated, which I have a story for that too. I'll come back to that. But the buses were getting integrated, and they were having kids go from like one neighborhood. Some people claim they're going to the opposite side, but it wasn't always the case. But basically, like white kids were going in schools where predominantly black kids were, and black kids were going to schools that were predominantly white. It seemed like they were forcing integration, but the reality was what they were trying to do was have kids integrate in different schools so they could spread out the resources. That was the whole idea behind it. But people just saw it purely by race, not understanding that historically speaking, years prior, these kids were separated by class. So there's kind of like that whole, like, the multi-layer, different demographics, right, that kind of separate people. Sometimes people don't recognize that class and race are not separate. They're actually almost interchangeable in certain spaces. So anyway, so all these white people were leaving, like, Boston, the surrounding areas, and they came to places like Haverhill. They actually came to other places too. Like, I know some people came to Atkinson, which is the next city over in New Hampshire. And there's, other towns like Plastow, Georgetown, Groveland, Methuen, it's another big one. And so anyway, these people, they thought they were escaping people of color, not realizing that the same reasons why they would want to move is the same reasons why minorities want to move, right? They want to have a house. They want to be able to be safe. They just want to be able to be part of a community that, is a good environment for their kids. But they feel that certain people shouldn't be around. So anyway, people fought. And that's kind of like my introduction to Haverhill and In a sense, being
But
biracial.
back then, what was your reaction? Because you're talking like now, that's like 20, 30 years of Mike acquiring knowledge. My point is, so you're there, you left Dorchester.
Yep.
There were fights in Dorchester? When you were there, you can't
No,
remember?
no, there weren't fights. Well, okay, no, I take that back. There were fights at the schools
Okay.
because remember they're forced integrated. So that story I said I would come back to.
That's
so,
why. Okay.
So I left while busing integration still happened. It was probably like the latter years of it. So, like in my particular case, I had to, as a 4 and 5-year-old, go on a bus with basically like freshmen, sophomores.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing to break down too. Like the context of Massachusetts integration actually happening long after the integration of the South.
Yeah.
So that's something I think people wouldn't even think about that, right? Because you're like, oh, that's up north. The up north usually takes the role of being the great union integrators.
Yeah, well, like we're more progressive up here. Like we're more reasonable.
Right.
But
So they didn't integrate those schools till like what, the 80s?
no, it was the late 70s. There's actually
70s,
there was a good documentary on PBS, and you can actually watch it on YouTube. It's totally free, and they actually explain like the whole process, how it began, and almost in a sense like not to kind of like create like a controversial wedge here, but like the same issues that we had with like masking, right? And you had all these people showing up at school board meetings either for or against masks, right?
Right.
And later on they were for against CRT, and later on for against DEI, right? You had all these people who were showing up at these school board meetings upset because the law says you need to integrate.
Right.
And they're like, no, why do we need to integrate? There's nothing wrong with their schools. They got their schools, we got our schools. It's not like we're separating races at like the grocery store or on the bus or anything like that, so we're good. Not understanding is like, no, when you're supposed to integrate, it was supposed to be everything, because the whole idea is to integrate, to share the resources, not just simply integrate based off of color.
Yeah. Now I want to get back to the class conversation, because like, and I want to ask you in all honesty, and I'll speak for myself. If I had the money, I'm pulling my kids out of public school. Like I would find a private institution that really hones and is really focused on them, who they are, to thrust them into success and, more family, more stuff. But I don't. So I deal with the public school system, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I understand that sometimes we expect things from systems that don't have the resources to meet the need. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, because everyone that's in public school are kind of trapped there.
Sure. Do you want to elaborate? I mean, like what sort of resources you feel like the school system is maybe inadequate for?
What we're doing right here, biracial, helping young people and helping people that are biracial understand their identity, find people like you and myself that have went through the challenges, that can create that specific education to put them in a better place than we had. So like I can't expect the school to create a project to do this correct and to get the right people. Like the school isn't going to be able to do that, because then they'd have to provide it for everybody. So that's what I'm saying. That's more privatized. care.
So it's funny you mentioned that, right? You're saying they would have to provide for everyone. So why don't we then try to work towards making sure they provide for everyone, right? Wouldn't that be the most logical thing?
No,
the government has resources.
Right, but that's the excuse, right? Like, so the excuse that most people that I think look at data and race, specifically race, right? If you get into racially divisive conversations, this idea of equality versus equity always raises up. But it has to be the same for everybody, right? So like in that context, that work has to happen before you roll it out on children. But you know that work is not going to happen right now.
Can you explain the difference between equity and equality?
I think you can. You can do that better than I can do.
No, actually, well,
If my wife was here, I'd put her like that's her.
yeah, I mean, from what I understand, equality is like when you literally try to make all things equal. Well, equity is you're trying to bring, like, where there's a disparity, you're trying to bring people up to the same level.
Correct. I mean, so equity, the way, you always, if you go to trainings, you'll see the slide of the fence. And then there's someone that's just standing and they can look over the fence. And then the person next to them is like, has to stand on a box to see over the fence. And then the other person is in a hole in a wheelchair. And there's nothing to provide, like there's no ramp or anything, so everyone can equally see the game of life. But I've also heard like people that are in that space that are brilliant dismantle that whole and be like, this analogy isn't enough. There needs to be this and all that stuff. But so the point is, equity is understanding, other people have disadvantages and trying to equal that out. In softball, when you play mixed softball, the men start with +1. So you start with a strike and a ball. So then the other batters that are there, it kind of levels out the playing field, so to speak. I don't know. So yeah, that would be my definition of equity.
So, I also know a bit about your background. I don't know everything, but we were just talking about like equality and equity, and like I'm thinking about like my personal background, right? Like once we moved to Hero, like we were solidly middle class. Like everything's pretty much all set. Was there struggle? Sure.
Yeah.
But I could say from what my parents were able to accomplish, I lived a pretty solidly middle class life. I was able to do all the middle class things, had a car by the time I was in high school, be able to go to college. It wasn't even a question. It was just like, where do I want to go? And, but I don't know, like, what was your experience?
It was just difficult because like my parents were young. So they were young when they met, they were artists, they were creatives. So there was no formal structure for poor, interracial 80s couple that are in the arts, right? So their passion kind of spiraled their life into party, substance abuse, and I was born kind of in that mix. I think my background is like I got a ton of experience because I was raised as a white child in a white community until I reached 14, and then you get the calling card, kind of I was big and I was getting into trouble. So the way justice was distributed to people of color that fit my was harsh. It was very, we got to hold all these people accountable. So I was absorbed into a system where that was the context. And I learned from that, I learned how to overcome systems, overcome people. And now, I think I'm my parents, my dreams. I'm an interracial creative that's free in actually living in my creativity, producing music, all of that stuff.
So I want to ask you this, something that's probably kind of controversial. It's something that I've thought about before, especially in the context of like my full name, right? And it even your full name, right? If anyone was to see our names on a piece of paper,
Right,
they would say, "Oh, no, that person is Anglo-Saxon. He's white. He's definitely, I don't know. He's good to make it to the next round of the interview, maybe."
right.
Despite maybe qualifications, or yeah, that person is probably fine to pass through a checkpoint. I don't know, a checkpoint like through ICE, maybe. Just throwing it out there. But you mentioned like when you were growing up to about 14, you kind of grew up white. Do you feel as though like you had did you have like a sense of privilege? Like we hear all the time, like white privilege is a thing.
Oh yeah, I still have privilege. Yeah, I mean, of course it did. Of course it did.
Well, no, explain that.
So my grandfather's a Korean War vet. He was born in Medford. He moved to Somerville, Winter Hill. He was a Teamster, so a union guy that drew trucks. If you know union men, they're rough. Like my grandfather was a very direct, and is, I shouldn't say was. I say was because he's retired. He's at home and I take care of him in a different space, and he's a shell of who he was when I was a younger guy. He's an older guy now.
Yeah.
But I have privilege because he loved me. Like my grandfather was, like that's my grandfather. He's a white Irish guy out here that comes from Somerville. So if you understand out here, who the hell was going to talk to him? And like most of the people, when you run into a system, right, it's who you know.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. So when other than my peers, right, when my grandparents would come or when my grandmother would come, they were Irish people that migrated from Boston to Haverhill. So when they called the school, when the school called them about my behavior, a lot of it was blamed on my mother and my father, right? So that was the thing. But when my grandparents called, it was a different, and yes, Mrs. Beamish, yes, your grandmother's coming, and they moved with a sense of urgency versus when it was my mother and my father, they wouldn't even call them. They'd call the police, and I would deal with a police officer or a social worker. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's sort of interesting. It's because that's not too, well, I don't want to say it's too dissimilar, because when I was growing up, my dad actually worked primarily third shift, so he wasn't always the one able to come to the school. He might have been sleeping, or like he was worst. He might have been working. He used to work in Boston, so my mother was usually the one who would come. And first of all, there would be a little issue there because I have a French last name, and they see my mom. They're like, "Who are you?" It's like, "Oh, I'm here for Michael."
Right. The visual.
Yeah, I mean, and eventually they'll connect the dots, because I mean, it's not like I'm pale or anything. Like, I do have a tan, so they're able to connect that much. But oh yeah, I guess he could be your kid. Mind you, the other issue was I was like, by third grade, I was taller than my mom.
Yeah.
So there was that too. But you know, the times that like my dad came by, I don't want to say like I was a troubled kid, but like I didn't, despite wearing glasses pretty much my whole entire life, I didn't necessarily take to being bullied. Like I would actually fight back.
So you had to check a couple people.
Yeah. And maybe that's the little bit of upbringing I had from Boston, but like,
Share a story.
so
Not one that's going to victimize or harm somebody, but
I'm not going to name names, but
Okay.
like there was one time it was foolish on my part. Like, there was a kid that I was basically friendly with, but like at the time I was getting bullied. And mind you, I addressed the bullies, but then I'm like, well, when I address the bullies, I can bully whoever. And I bullied this kid. And of course, sure enough, the principal rightfully was like, took me out of class and like, hey, you can't do that. And then called my mother. And I personally remember this too, not the exact words, but I remember the tone where she was like talking down to my mom. And unlike today, where like you could have a principal who has like a master's and all sorts of other credentials, back then they probably just had a bachelor's.
right.
And my mom already had her bachelor's too. So it's like you're talking down to someone who at bare minimum is probably your equal.
Right.
And
So much.
the fact that she was doing that, like, that irked me. But like at the same time, like when my dad came, the conversation was never like that. It was just like, kind of like you were saying, it's like the same tone, like, oh yeah, Mr. Boucher, of course.
Right.
You know, like, we'll handle it from here. There should be no other problems. But like, to my mom, talk down. And I remember like my mom a few times would, you know, she would make it clear to me that like I have to be mindful about how I navigate through spaces, because I do look different compared to the other kids in the school. And as a result, I would have more interactions like that if I keep acting out.
Right.
So sure enough, I didn't do anything like that ever again. My mother's all Jamaican, so Jamaicans don't play.
Yeah.
So
That's where that fire is coming from.
yeah. So, you know, she talked to me, but it was a very stern talk.
Right.
To remind me, like, yeah, we don't do that.
So that's so interesting. I mean, yeah, I think like, so that's a whole nother dialogue, like systems, right? Navigating the systems as a biracial. My question, so I'm gonna ask a provoking question.
Sure.
So I've had a friend, and I'll probably have this friend here eventually,
Okay.
that grew up impoverished, grew up the same as me, except he's white, right? So the our friendship has really been challenged through the years that we've just gone through, because his perspective, like other people that I know, is just different than mine, and it's like it seems like I don't know. It just seems like, so my point is, have you had any of those situations? People you were really close with, that you grew up with, but now like the times we're in is straining the relationship. And remember, it's bi-rational. No.
Right. So maybe not super close, but like people that, we kind of kept in touch with over the years. I think, and I don't want to like specifically name anyone or I have anyone specifically in mind, but like I see the way certain people act in relation to like my life, where it almost seems maybe hostile or competitive, because it's like I know how they grew up and they already had the advantages. Like they grew up in a nice house, they had both their parents like around, but they didn't make it.
Oh, okay.
So
How they spent the time.
well, they spent the time leisurely, right? Because they didn't necessarily have to work that hard. They weren't struggling. Like they were the kids who, as I was growing up, right? Like for me, it was a big deal. And I know this is sort of minor, but like it's sort of an indicator of how middle class you were. It's like when you got a video game system, right? Did you get a video game system when it debuted?
Right.
Or did you get a video game system later down the years? Once someone pass it down to you or gift it to you, whatever. Right. So in my case, I did get video game systems, but it wasn't like when they debuted. It might be like 2 years later, and I'm finally catching up.
Right.
But they would get it like very soon. Like they would get it like within a month from debuting. They already have like a library of games. And a lot of these same people who had those experiences as they got older and they got out of high school, for example, like in high school, they were average. They didn't work that hard. Like as I was growing up, I was told you got to keep your grades up.
Right.
Because realistically, even if my parents had the resources to pay for college, they're like, you're getting a scholarship. And I did eventually get scholarships, and I went to college early. Like there was a pathway that I knew I had to take advantage of.
Yeah. Shout out to you.
Yeah.
Because I was kicked out at 14. I went to school. I was in-house suspension, and they brought in like the coach figure, and they passed out lunch, and I forget, the dude like screamed at me over something I wasn't supposed to do, but kind of like that rough thing. So I threw the food tray at him. I pulled the fire alarm, and I kicked the window out, and I ran off the building. My sister was a year older. She came like, "What are you doing?" Like, you know what I mean? And I was like, F this school. And then like I ran off, and I would get my GED later on. But my point is like school was just so unwelcoming for the complexity of the issues I was having at that age.
Right.
Like you're saying, I was biracial, all white school, with a relative as like the black person. But I couldn't even go to that person because they were a relative. It was like, what am I going to do? Go tell my loved one about my family? Right. And then when I did go through the process, it always ended up me being removed. So think about it, right? Like you go to the nurse to try to message something, they come to your house, take you out, and all of those things. So it just sets up this mindset where I think like where people look at especially in impoverished communities, people always look at snitching. That's where that's really rooted. Do you get what I'm saying? It's not like really crime and all that stuff. It's rooted in don't tell the authorities because they're just going to come and take what little we have away. So I learned that at a young age. I don't think it's that way anymore. I think things have progressed. But when I was a kid, that was my experience. And then it taught me to be like, I need to leave the system and go independently find a path to survival, because like you could see, like the guys that were making it in college, when I'm looking at you, I'm like, it's not going to happen for me. It just felt so detached because you need consistency.
Right.
To be good in school, you got to be there consistently, but it's hard to be consistent when you're dealing with like real threats of violence in your atmosphere.
Yeah. So
Andy, can I get an amen from over there or something? So I'm not like speaking by myself. You know what I'm talking about. Thank you.
So there's a bit of a convergence there, actually, with what you're saying, this whole idea of like independence and be able to carve your own path, right? So
Yes.
even if you didn't end up going to college, and I went to go to college, we both had our own, we both recognized we need to have our own individual path towards success. Kind of circling it all back to like those people that I grew up with who always had that privilege and those resources.
Right.
They never thought once they had to carve their own path. They just assumed that one was going to be given to them. So then when they became adults and now and not to diminish like certain type of jobs, or like one person I know, for example, he became a trucker. And I was like, trucker? Like, where did that come from? Like, he was college bound for sure.
Right.
And he became a trucker because it turns out when he got old enough, his parents were like, no, I'm not going to take care of you. You're an adult. Like, I'm not going to take care of you. And then kind of in the longer, the broader view of it is that these people, they get this animosity, right? They see someone like myself, they see someone like you, two different paths that we took, both found success.
Right.
And they get angry and frustrated, and there's this animosity, and unfortunately, that animosity, and it's sort of ridiculous, but the animosity almost becomes racialized because they just simply look at us and say, "Oh, look at them."
Yeah, it's a choice. I feel so. From my perspective, I think you're always going to have people that choose to react a certain way, right? And the energy you give towards those people is a decision. So for me, like, right, like I'm just. Like, if you don't want to do work on yourself as a white person to be free, that is your choice. And I mean to understand the diversity, but I find in my experience, far more people that are not poor. I should put a pin in poverty.
Yep.
Right. But people that make it out of poverty and really hard work, get their family to a place. Once they have the privilege of sitting and getting educated, some will deny it for a little bit. Like, I don't want to believe that.
Yep.
But then as you get money, if you don't get around other people that are intelligent, having money and being around a bunch of ignorant poor people, that's not conducive for success, right? So you find that those, even the ones that linger, eventually end up seeing, okay, for this, you end up seeing the facts, and it pushes you towards addressing. Now, when that happens, I find more people than not, from my observation, and that's what I try to go off of, tend to lean towards progressive movement. There is a small portion that I do see that are just like, no, after that, I'm stubborn. This is what I believe. This is what we believe. But that's what gives me the rationale not to be so like chasing every radical racist, because it's my time, right? Like, it's like the minute I choose to engage, anyone that follows a person that is propping up that stuff, that's their choice. A lot of that, I think, from my perspective, is seated in harm. I think people get hurt in different ways and they want a quick answer. They don't want to go through therapy. They don't want to take accountability and do all the growth. So racializing it puts a pin in it so you can move on and be back out there doing whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So I just don't choose that. I have more responsibility and all of that stuff. So I'm just saying that, like, the reason I'm kind of highlighting all of that stuff is, as a biracial person, you're more exposed to those intersections. So you have to be more cautious of what you're giving your energy to. And my point is this: instead of giving my energy to all those kids that did all that stuff, I give my energy to you in applauding you, because we went through the same pressure. The difference is I didn't have emotional maturity, right? And I ended up like being like, I'm just going to fight. You know what I mean? But my instincts kicked in, and you did it well, but you were able to, you know what I'm saying, do it in a way that it didn't go dark. Had I done the same decisions you did, the impact would have been different. And that's what we need to switch. We need to learn from like, because you talked about being on Cedar Street. You talked about seeing the same stuff I seen, but for me, maybe because I'm an artist, I'm sensitive, I couldn't let it go. So teaching each other how, the point of this is where people can think and hear skills and implement those skills into their way of being to get better results. Because, you know, we don't want no one going to jail or spiraling emotionally.
Right. So, when you think about, like, you know, your past and sort of think about the dynamic of being both black and white, or in my case, I like to be, I don't know, some people find this an issue, but like, I don't necessarily think myself as just as black because I am also Jamaican. I don't want to diminish that.
Jamaica's like its own planet in Earth.
But I mean, even if, but I also like to point out, because it is kind of a different diaspora within the world of black. I don't know. Some people disagree, but I see it being a little different, and it has its own issues in itself, right? But anyway, I don't want to distract from that. But what I was going to say is, like, going between, like, thinking about the two different identities that you have, and thinking about, I guess, I don't want to say trauma, but maybe the difficulty of trying to navigate that. At what point do you identify that you might maybe need therapy, or is there a therapy? Like, I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. Like
if someone's going through being biracial, at what point do you think that they need to consider therapy, you say? No?
Yes. Like,
or for me, when did I?
Yeah, when did you? But also for other people, like, how should they, because it's hard, right? When you're dealing with something, you don't necessarily automatically determine, like, oh, I need to go do this.
Correct.
So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like, when did you identify that you needed to? And then if so, how could other people identify it?
So I have identified, as I've matured and grown and gotten wise and work, you know, you end up understanding the system that we're privileged to live in. I am pro-American as a society construct, because I think it is a construct where you can put your hand to the creation of culture, right? There's pathways to have an impact. So the reason I'm pro-therapy is because these systems have gotten priority over people, right? But we're all paying taxes. So out of your check, out of all of my check, we have money, and anyone that's paying health insurance, my God, we're paying through the roof. So shouldn't those services meet a certain level of standard? A lot of the services I see and that I kind of look at are services once something happened. And we talk about Obama, preventative. What is preventative, right? Preventative means leaning the health industry in a way where it prevents stuff from happening versus being a reactive, responsive one. So a lot of the stuff we get into, if you funnel it down to its core, mental health, we all know, right, is a space where you could have an impact. So, you know, like, and there's always the all or nothing. Having an impact makes a huge difference. If you're able to increase mental health services by 25%, that is a massive number of people that are now leaning into the betterment of their mind. How many times are we in community and we're watching someone make decisions where you're like, this person is crazy, right? But they are like that. Yeah. So that's the point is, people are going crazy because their external is becoming too heavy for their internal.
Yeah.
So, and the people, you know, that find different, that's where I think we see the elevation of all faith and all this stuff. People are crying for help, but the help that we need to help them with is helping themselves, right? People need to learn to sit in the weight of emotion and make a better decision. And that's difficult, right? So that's my whole point is, like, I think everyone should be mental health, but this is the thing. Mental health needs to be reimagined. Huh? And reimagine, though. My point is, like, think about it. Mental health is you come and you sit in a guy and he's on a track. Like, that's part of the work. Sometimes it was just go and get a burger.
Yep.
Sometimes listen to a song. It's going to a men's group, having a men's breakfast. So you're right in normalizing, but it needs to be interwoven into every day. Like, this is mental health.
Yeah.
We know that. We're coming here starting a podcast. Where's the insurance check? Where's the insurance money? Because I'm just saying, we're providing a service.
Yeah. No, part of the reason I was asking you this, so the reason I emphasize being Jamaican is that one thing in Jamaican culture is that, and this is kind of messed up to admit,
Right.
having mental and even sometimes physical impairment is considered a weakness.
Right.
As a Jamaican, you don't show weakness.
Yeah.
Which that's obviously a horrible thing. So I think it's important to say, yeah, you should normalize these things. There's nothing wrong with having or needing help, right?
Yes, but it's so this is the approach, right? Like, people from outside of a space will normally talk about what a space needs to do instead of saying, we need to listen more. You're Jamaican, so you could say that. Now let's go to Jamaica and find the Jamaican leaders, because they're there. There are men that are in the trenches of Jamaica making decisions. And then it's for them to confirm and help transform, and everyone external to resource those leaders. Because if you're a leader, you understand the weight of leadership. You get what I'm saying? Like people walk away from helping issues because a thing called cholesterol, diabetes. Like, eventually you have to prioritize your health over the circumstances, and it's a small window. So to your point, like, Jamaica's not alone. There's a bunch of culture stuff. I think when I met a restorative guy, I shouldn't call him a guy, he's a chief, and his people navigated the Trail of Tears, which I'm not going to get into that. You could Google that. But when I was really caught up with, am I in a place where I should be a restorative anything? This is First Nations practices. In my ignorance, I didn't realize it's African and, it's a world practice. But in the beginning, you're seeing it's a First Nation practice. Should I really be the face of this? So I reached out to him, and he told me, he dropped 2 gems on me. One, there's that which is tradition and there's that which is sacred. Right? And he said, what you're doing is sacred. Second of all, who are your people? And when he asked me that question, who are your people, right? He don't even have to explain. I know. He's saying, who are my blood people?
Right.
Where do my people come? Because those experiences through DNA are forged in me, right? So understanding who my people are, he put me on the path to understanding myself.
So I got to interject, but when you, because you are biracial, right?
Right.
Does that, when you said, you gotta, it's all about your people, right? Did you have a thought of who those people were?
Well, yeah, I mean,
did you split it up in your mind, or you were just like, no?
I am a Ronin. I think if you were to look at you, and this is the other thing, right? So I'm a student. I read Power Self-Education, a nonprofit. Me and my wife really put out there. We believe in self-education. We believe that once you learn to read, you don't access yourself to just one scope. You read as much as possible in tangent with what you're trying to get through. So my whole point is, I've read a whole bunch of different, it might seem not connected, but it's connected. And if I was to consider myself anything, it would be a Ronin, like the samurai. When the samurai lost their headship, right, the Ronin couldn't serve no other direct, because you need trust and you need experiences to really be a part of a culture and a community. Like I've even left the South. So as my family got in years ago, my family said, we're out of here. And they left Alabama and Georgia, and they came up here to Massachusetts. That's a disconnect now with the leadership structure and all of that stuff. And then you enter here where you have families that have been here for generations. So we're talking about old ways. You get what I'm saying? Now, through this culture that has been created, because I think America is like an invention space for humanity, right? Like if you're really going to be honest, this space was not created by one race. It's created by a collective of of people that were magnetized here.
I agree with that, but then look at the world we're living in.
Well, I'm not talking about who controls the military.
Well, no, I'm not,
That's a different.
no,
that's a
no,
whole
I'm not
different
talking about
discussion.
people who control the military. I'm talking about we're living in a time right now in which there's an administration who are basically saying, no, there is a group of people who they're the dominant. This is how our society should be. Our culture should derive from those people. I don't agree with them, but that's what they're trying to do. And I think, and I didn't mean to interject here, but I think that what they're trying to do cannot work. And I'm not saying that because I'm hopeful, because I think there's just too much of other cultures all kind of meshed into one that makes it literally impossible. Like one thing they're trying to do, I don't know if you pay attention to this in the news, but like, you know, speaking of being interracial, they want to end interracial marriage. They've already indicated this.
Yeah.
But how would that work in this day and age? There's so many more interracial couples than ever. It's one of the fastest growing populations in the whole entire United States. It's growing so fast that I don't know if you've probably seen that front cover, that National Geographic cover of like, this is what
The future.
future person's supposed to be. And it's like somebody about my complexion, maybe a little darker, blue eyes, curly, blonde, frosted tip hair, which I think they're kind of going wild there with the computer models. I don't think that's realistic, but the fact of the matter is, what they're really trying to say is you're going to get it to a point in the United States that you won't be able to distinguish someone as being purely, I don't know, European, for example, or whatever they want to call white. Because white has been an ever-changing and expanding thing where, you know, historically it was like, you know, the British, the French, the Dutch, right? And then over time it expanded, and then they started to include the Germans. And then over time they started to include the Irish and the Italians and the Jews, which is kind of a complicated one where their religion is also their race. And I forget the actual term for that is. And then they started including other people like Armenians and Turkish people who are kind of confused because they're both Asian and European.
Yeah.
You know?
So for me, the guardrails is harm. You know, like where I build relationships is not on color, it's not on race, it's on, is a person trying to harm somebody, harm themselves. Do you get what I'm saying? Because that's another thing people kind of gloss over. Sometimes people are self-destructive in their own home, and they just, you're the contact point where they take it out.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm blessed because I have a lot of children. So when you have a big family, I think you care and you start being more shrewd with your public time. Right. So like big things that when I was younger, people could suck me into the gangs and the we mentality. Like, you know, we got to do something. But then I would go and get in trouble. So I learned, you know, you learn to be like, oh, I got to set boundaries or my life will go astray, because there'll always be a bunch of people looking to pull you into some movement or some task. But if you're passionate about a movement and a task and you're really looking to impact change, I think it starts with understanding how small you are, right? Like we're all only here for a certain amount of time. And within there, yes, you can have an impact. Yes, you can do stuff. But this whole idea of like what that impact will look like, it's like writing in the sand. Like when you're at the beach and you're drawing in the sand, it only lasts until the wave comes. And when the wave comes, blank slate again. And that's the thing of humanity. We see cycles and patterns. And I'm talking if you're a historian, if you're an analyst of history and man's rise from wilderness to sitting here doing a podcast, like that story has been tracked. So once you do all of that thinking, you can create a kind of guardrail for yourself where you meet your deeper responsibilities. We're doing this podcast. We have this civil fire, right, to do something in the time, but we also have to pick our kids up from school, right? So that's where the by rationale comes. Anything impulsive, anything super aggressive lacks sustainability, I've learned, right? You have to be able to chip away at bigger things in a like a marathon. And in this work, you have to have a baton relay race mentality. You have to understand that you're running with a stick, but the real intense stuff, you're going to have to pass that stick to someone else.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to continue running. And at the point, you're going to be old cheering, and they make decisions that you don't. And that's where we're at as like, if I'm going to, in my African American identity, which has been in both of my identity, because I'm not rooted strongly in either one. I don't think I'll ever be trusted in either one because they're so divided. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, maybe. Well, see, my perspective is sort of skewed. I mean, I know that we try, like you and I both, like try to do work in our community, but our communities are also quite different, right? So, like the community I live in New Hampshire, you know, it's predominantly white, right? So, like the fact that even I'm in a position to even represent other people and help organize and lead them towards any sort of positive change in itself is sort of unusual.